Welcome back to the Supercoach Fundamentals series with me, JD. In our first video, we went over the basics of player assessment and how different types of players fit into these categories. If you haven't watched it, I suggest you start there, but the quick overview is that we look at three main things. How much do they cost, how well do they score, and can they play every game? Written here as price, scoring, and durability. Each of the main types of players, namely rookies, mid-prices, fallen premiums, traps, avoids and hard avoids, as well as our solid picks and locks, fall into these categories. We can get an edge over the competition by selecting or avoiding players based on an evaluation of them, with the goal being to find more players we can lock in. In our second video, we covered durability, particularly as it relates to assessing the impact of injuries, and in our third video, we went over how to identify a player's scoring potential and the main factors you should assess. Today, in the final video of this series, we're going to bring all of our concepts together by introducing price. While we pointed out in the last video that scoring is ultimately how you win, the essence of Supercoach is in value. That is to say, when we select our winning team, we aren't trying to maximize on-field points from round one, we're trying to maximize points over the course of the year. And to do that, we need to find players that present value. So what's the difference? Simply put, price is what you pay for something, value is what you think it's worth. We look at durability and scoring and then compare it to a player's price and see if we value them above, below, or roughly at their price. But before we get into value, let's quickly cover off the basics of pricing in Supercoach. Price is calculated, or the starting price, I should say, is calculated by using the magic number. So, price is last year's average times by the magic number, which the magic number itself, I won't go into huge detail here because it's not critical unless you really want to get into the super nerdy parts of Supercoach. But it's the number used by Supercoach to effectively price players, with it generally decreasing over the course of the year, which has the effect of dragging a player's price down over the course of the year, even if they continue to score last year's average, as a fun little aside. It's best to kind of show this with worked examples, so let's jump into it. Price has a direct relationship to scoring as it's based off last year's score. So for Dunkley, in 2022, his price is 102.5 times by the magic number, which is 5,445, or roughly that this year, which gets you to approximately his price. And for some players, and this is obviously like rounded up and down to the nearest $100, I don't do the $1 places and all that type of stuff. And for some players, price has a relationship to durability as well, as Supercoach offers discounts of between 10 to 30% based off games missed due to injury. So while Josh Dunkley in the example above didn't get any discount despite missing 12 games, we actually know that Canelio did. And this discounting is done at Supercoach discretion, so there usually isn't any formula you can follow, but in general, the more games a player has missed, the bigger the discount. So for an example, with Cogs here, so we would expect his price to be 60, his average times by the magic number, once again, of 5,445, which should give a price in the low 300,000 range. Instead, his actual price is 261,300. And we can actually, back solve this a couple of ways to figure out exactly what the discount was. So I've done one method there. Another way you can do it is actually do the price divided by the magic number to see the average that they're priced at. So 261,000, which is his actual price, divided by the magic number equals him being priced at the equivalent of a 48 average. So now that we've introduced price, we can compare a player's price to our assessment of their scoring and durability and determine if they represent good, poor, or fair value. With those that represent the best value, the ones that we start to lock away, let's go through this and how it applies to some of the groups we've talked about in a little bit more detail. So let's start with rookies, but I guess non-keepers in general. So the big concept to consider here, which is like a little bit tangential, but I promise you it all does come together, is that firstly, one trade is worth approximately 150 grand. This is what current experts believe to be a trade to be worth. But as an aside, like I've never seen someone do analysis on proving this out, that this is actually the true value of a trade. And there may be some big benefit to someone that can prove that it's actually a different number to what we historically work towards. But the important thing here to note is that any players you aren't planning to keep, you're aiming to have them meet this hurdle of 150k in cash generation before you trade them out. As I mentioned, during the season, the magic number decreases. So it starts at, what did we say, 5,445, and it goes down to around the 5,000 mark. I mean, this isn't always linear. It changes year to year. So yeah, just take 5,000 as a rough estimate. But if you think about it, 150,000 divided by 5,000, so similar to the formula we've done before, would mean that a player would need to average an additional 30 points to what they're priced at to make that 150k. Now, in general, we actually use the 35-point rule rather than a 30-point rule, and that's because it's hard to time when you trade out a rookie to be exactly at that 150k mark. You know, there's usually some wastage, as you might need to trade one out early or late, and it's usually never at peak. So if you aim to get players that are averaging 35 points more than what they're priced at, this gives room for wastage and lets you kind of make sure that the players you're getting will provide enough value so you can upgrade your team to full premium as the year goes on. Now, where this comes into play for rookies is they are priced as follows. I don't know if I really want to read all of these line by line, but it illustrates the different pricing. So you have all the way from your 102k, which is your first year rookie listed players, priced at 18.7. And once again, this is just done with the same calculation we showed before. So 102,000 divided by 5,445 gives you that value that they're priced at. All the way through to what the number one pick has in Horn Francis this year. So 207,300 divided by 5,445 equals 38.1. Now, as we mentioned, we can add 35 to each of these implied averages that they begin with, and that becomes the average that that player needs to, or that rookie needs to score for them to be a worthwhile selection at the start of the year. And by worthwhile, I mean obviously that they make that 150k in your team so you can continue upgrading. This also holds true for mid prices. They either need to be cheap enough that they can make 150,000, or they need to be able to become a keeper. So you figure this out by simply looking at what is their average now, and say they're averaged at 50. They would either need to make 85 at a minimum average to kind of be at that value, or say they were starting at a higher average, say they were starting at 90. These players are ultimately either going to become, they have to become keepers, otherwise they're not worth picking. And by becoming a keeper, we specifically mean that they end up being one of the top scorers for their line. And this is why someone like Adam Chera, for example, may be overlooked as a mid-price option this year. While he has moved to a new club, he's got great pedigree, and he's in the age range for someone that could improve. At his price and average, which is 490,000 or a 90.1 average, simply improving 15 points isn't enough, because he won't be a top 8 mid and he won't have made enough cash using the formulas that we've kind of outlined here. And it is, in my mind at least anyway, completely unreasonable to think that he would improve his average by, say, 30 points, which is what would be required to get up to that top 8 mark. So while Adam Chera may present value and he may outperform his price, he isn't a good pick still. And then for the other two categories, I think this is probably somewhat self-explanatory given where we started with mid prices. So fallen premiums usually need to be keepers as well, as they tend to only be slightly discounted. There are always some exceptions to the rule. Cogs is a great example of that this year. And for our solid picks, aka our premiums, they of course need to be keepers. You are only picking these players to be a top 8 in their position, and if you don't think they will be, then you shouldn't have them at all. So to recap, a player's price, scoring, and durability history gives us their initial classification from rookie all the way through to our locks. We then assess their scoring potential and durability history to their current price and make a judgment call to move them closer or further away from being a lock. With the players, we are locking away generally representing the best value for our teams. And with that all said, that really brings us to a conclusion for this short round of fundamentals series or videos on how to assess players and pick a winning team. I hope you've enjoyed this series. I know it's been a bit of a change of format and focused on Supercoach theory rather than individual players, but please let me know how you found it, because I guess it's a bit of a toss-up for me for whether I do more theory videos in the future. But for now, I wish to thank you all very much, and I will be seeing you with some more regular preseason content from next week.